Indeed. Valerie Hayes mentioned earlier that we're in our prayer season. We're having our praying groups. And quite frankly, I don't know of any other congregations that do this, that have these prayer sessions where they allow the facilitators to bring their own authentic prayer practice to the table, where it's not scripted. We're not telling people what to do or how to do it. There is a particular prayer practice that we ask everybody to be introduced to called a spiritual mind treatment, because it's a good kind of universal way to do things and to understand what the anatomy of a prayer is. But the main thing that I tell the facilitators who are our trained practitioners is be real. You don't have to know all the secrets of the universe. It's not a class, it's not it. Just what do you know? That what I want people to do is to feel that you know something. And for that to be so inspiring as to people to say, I want to know a little bit about what you know. I may get there a different kind of way, but what's most important is not that the people there think you're all that and all that smart, but so that they can just feel you and know you. That takes a certain amount of vulnerability, but that's where the juju juice is. So I want to say thank you for bringing your vulnerability and letting us praise with you. Because that wasn't for us. That wasn't about us. That's you and your prayer. Thank you for taking us with you. We're all going. My theme this month is grace. What is my topic today? Intentional provision. Delighting in intentional provision. This is good. I made an emergency trip on Friday down to my brother in Los Angeles. He's a dentist. I'd been feeling some pain. And he said he could see me yesterday morning at 9. He was like, good. So I went down, but it was worse than what I thought, and he extracted a molar. And then I drove back. So, it's okay. I did it. I don't recommend it. But thank you for reminding me what the topic is. So the spirit definitions are these wonderful ways of helping us understand the spiritual qualities. And I say this all the time, which is why that song was so perfect, is that they describe spiritual qualities as a space, as an activity, as an energetic field. We tend to think of them as objects and things that we chase after. We think of faith as a noun. Faith is a verb. We think of peace as a noun. Peace is a verb. It is an action, it is an activity. And it's not localized. I want you to catch that. It's not localized. That it's an activity that's taking every place. And these downloads, these spiritual definitions are saying, this is what you have to bring to the table. This is what's already at the table. And then there's an activity, which think of it as a vibratory field. There's something that has to resonate within you in order for you to really be able to experience the spiritual qualities. They're never absent. It's just a question of how much do you experience it. See? Joy is never absent. Just sometimes you feel it and sometimes you don't. But when you don't feel it doesn't mean it's not there. Catch me now. Just because you may not be personally feeling abundance doesn't mean abundance is not there. But how often do we declare something as being completely not there just because I'm not feeling it? And what we do then is we want to wait till we see the evidence of it. And then when I see it, then I'll feel it. It's the other way around. It's the other way around. We normally come from, I will believe it when I see it. It is completely the other way around. You'll see it when you believe it. You'll see it when you believe it. It defines grace this way. It says grace is where your spoken and unspoken needs, your spoken and your unspoken needs delight in my intentional provision. Isn't that beautiful? Grace is where your spoken and unspoken needs delight in my intentional provision. We could be here a week talking about all of that. It's like, I don't even know where I want to start first. I think I want to start with delight. In my little pea brain, no. Something inside just got mad at me for saying that. And I know what it was, too. That was Wilhelmina. Wilhelmina's like, no, I'm not a pea brain. This is a Wilhelmina question. So Wilhelmina is my alter ego. That's a little unfiltered, that kind of blurts out what's on all of our minds. So the Wilhelmina in me is like, what you talking about needs delighting? That's a contradiction. Just the whole idea of my needs delight. My needs don't delight. My needs are in fright. They don't delight. That's what I just heard. Some people have an inner child. I got a whole inner committee. There's so much going on up in there. Okay. One at a time. One out my mouth at a time. So imagine that for a moment. If your needs took delight. Wow, isn't that a paradigm shift? Delight, to take pleasure in. The Buddhists call it beginner's mind. Jesus said you had to come under this stuff like a little child. And don't mistake that for meaning immature or gullible in some kind of way. It's that children are still into the magic. They're still into the wonder. They haven't gotten stuck on all of the reasons why not. Are you with me? And when they get in their little sense of need, they have all these wonderful anticipatory things of how it's going to be met. There's a sense of excitement about that. Are you with me? When we're stuck in our what's the word I want to use? What is the word? I'll let you know when I think of it. But I want to be very specific about this. Because I find in the New Thought movement, metaphysics, that we spend way too much emphasis on individual consciousness. And we ignore the impact and the effects of collective consciousness. Okay? And we misunderstand that because when we say everything's out of consciousness, people think that we're blaming them about their individual consciousness. But it's not about your individual consciousness. So if I say, for example, there's such a thing as racism, okay? And racism comes from consciousness. I'm not like blaming individual people, like their individual consciousness. There's this whole system of beliefs and practices that has come out of millennium of collective consciousness. Are you with me? And there's ways that we respond to collective consciousness where we not only accept it and believe it, we metastasize it even in our body temples. That's part of what evolution is about, where literally the human body has been changing over time. Changing over time. These aren't the same bodies that the Neanderthals had. It shifts, it evolves. Are you with me? And a lot of even what we call genetic dispositions aren't really about our genetics at all. There have been so many interesting studies where people who are adopted into families and aren't even biologically related will sometimes manifest the exact same symptoms or illnesses or quote-unquote diseases that have been running in that family for generations. Okay? For generations. Now, the insidious part about it is that we get exposed to collective consciousness before we are mature enough and strong enough and individualized enough to know what it is we've bought into. We start soaking it in as children, whatever that is that's around us. Are you with me? Okay. And we have gotten into this thing of feeling like in our collective consciousness, particularly here in the United States, need is bad. And the last thing you want to do is to be in need of anything. Because need makes you vulnerable, and most especially, need makes you weak. I was watching Dr. Brene Brown a couple of days ago. I really like her work. I've gotten turned on to her through Oprah. And this was one of her TED Talks. I forgot which one this particular one was. She studies shame and guilt and vulnerability. And she is so spot on. I really love her. She's from Houston. And she was talking about how guilt is what we feel about things we've done, but shame is then how we feel about ourselves. Okay. And she was saying how shame shows up differently depending upon gender. And she says, for women, most of the shame is around a not enoughness. This kind of, you know, how you're supposed to bring home the bacon and fry it up in the pan, use that example, and still never let you forget you're a man. Like, you know, supposed to do everything. And this kind of irking thing that somehow we're not enough and we're not being able to do everything. And that for the shame for men was about being weak. That any kind of sign of being weak, and how we all collude with each other or whatnot in this stuff. What I know on the spiritual journey is that faith is something that we grow into. We have it, but in order to experience it, we have to have it proven to ourselves. you can't step out on my faith. You can be inspired by it, maybe, encouraged, uplifted, motivated, but you can't step out on my faith. Are you with me? You can't love with my heart. You can be motivated by it, you can be inspired by it, but when it comes time for you to take that loving step, it has to be your love. Are you with me? It's got to be your love. And being a spiritual counselor for quite a number of years now, I noticed that most people develop this thing called faith at deeper and deeper levels as they witness their needs being met. Or just needs being met. Even if it's not their need, their kids' need, the family's need, the societal need. Are you with me? That there's something about watching that process that makes us believers, so to speak. Are you with me? The more we can see that needs are being met, the more we get into gratitude. Just the more grateful that we become. Okay? But then there's this tricky thing that happens here with us. And that is, what do we do with that information once we have it? I was watching on YouTube a couple of days ago Wanda Sykes. I love Wanda. She's this African-American stand-up comedian. She's very funny. And I particularly like this routine that she does, one of her long things called I'ma Be Me. And she was talking about how we really needed to do some reform in the way that we do our school system here in the United States. And that there's less and less emphasis on real learning and more on regurgitation. So people cram stuff in their brains and cram stuff in their brain just enough to do the tests, and then they forget it. I remember looking at a study not too long ago. It was some alarming amount, like something like students were tested at the beginning of the academic year, tests that they had taken right at the end, like something that tests in May, they then tested it in September. And something like 67% of what they were able to pass in May or June, they couldn't do in September. Just like spot on it, without review, without, all the rest of that. And, and she did her body like this. She said, it's like our brains are a big Etch-a-Sketch. It's like as soon as we learn something, like, dump that. And that's how we spiritually learn as well. Catch what I'm saying? That's how we do our spiritual learning. Like, okay, I'm in this situation, I'm in this crisis, I'm in this whatever, blah, 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 blah. My need got met. I got it. I passed that exam. Let me erase that. So, when I need that information in September to draw on from the miracles that happened in my life in May, I can't remember. And I got to start up all over again. Or I got to learn all over again. Are you with me? Okay. We don't make it cumulative. Things happen, and we forget. So part of the reason why I contend we're not stepping out on as much faith that we can step out on is because we just don't remember. And most of us, because we can't remember it and we can't see it, will think it hasn't happened. Miracles haven't happened for me. Doors haven't opened for me. provision hasn't happened for me. But that's not true. We're just not connecting the dots. Are you with me? We're not connecting the dots. And what I want to encourage you to do is to connect the dots. Just as an exercise, a regular practice. Tonight, just go through your life. Think about those times when you thought you really had a big need, whatever that was. You needed to move. You needed a babysitter. I mean, it could be anything. And just kind of recall how those things happened. What was the resolution? How did things come up? Maybe you needed a caregiver at the time. Maybe you needed a ride. Maybe you needed a ticket to go visit an ailing parent or something like that. And what will happen with that is you will be humbled at all the ways you didn't make it happen. Are you with me? And you will be reminded of all of the ways that so-called serendipity happened. Or luck. Things that you can't actually explain. But when you start to connect the dots, when you start to actually put it all together, then it starts to be a place where you can stand. All those instances where it just worked out, that's grace. All those times when those needs got met, that's grace. And what you begin to see in that is that it was intentional. It wasn't just accidental. When I look at how all of it has to line up, like all the different things that have to come together at that exact moment, there is no way this could be just luck. Not over and over and over and over again. No way. No way. It is pure grace that comes together. I was having some conversations over the last week with people who were here when we first got the center. And we were talking about just all of these things. Sometimes I share these stories that were happening, and I share these because they are collective stories. They're in our collective memory, and in the Inner Light community. How when we first bought this place, the back lot was just dirt. And we bought the place we actually closed escrow in September and opened the doors at the beginning of October in 2003. Well, the rains came not too long after that. And the place was just a swamp back there. I don't know how many times AAA had to come and bail people out. So these people I didn't even know had rock, like gravel. That's not cement out there. It's just rock. And they donated the rock, and lo and behold, somebody who had, I don't even know what you call those things, but those big tractors that have the roller on it. Yeah, the grader? Whatever. Get the picture. And I don't know where these women came from, and I haven't seen them, and I just saw them at a basketball game a couple of weeks ago. It's like they came out of nowhere with this gravel and this grader. The good you seek is seeking you. the gravel needed to go somewhere. Are you with me? Or the Mangles. So Bob and Jane used to own a nursery. And they had sold the nursery to some employees, some like 5 years or so before that. And I forgot the circumstances, but they wound up having to take it back. And there were all these plants that they were going around to flea markets and whatnot trying to sell because these plants were going to die if they weren't planted. So they come to me and they say, can you use these plants? I said, what do I know about plants? It's like, yeah, sure, because it looked pretty shabby around this sanctuary. So they said, you know what? We will take the plants, and they laid them all out around the sanctuary to show what it might look like. And all the board came around, and they said, we'll plant them. We will garden them, because they were hardy plants. It only needed about 6 months' worth of care, but we'll do that. That was an unspoken need. See? Everybody in the mud in the back, oh, I knew that was a need. But catch it. But I didn't think there was an answer. It was a spoken need. We all knew we needed to do something. And the best that we thought it was, let's just close it off when it's raining so nobody gets stuck. But it never occurred to me, rock and gravel, or that somebody would come and do the doggone stuff for us. Never occurred to me. Are you with me? Okay. But how many of us would get into that because I can't see a way, I just got to live with this? Or because I can't see a way, well, it's just the way that it is. You with me? Or all the race consciousness about, well, you can't afford it, you can't pay for it, and how much we would let that get in the way. We're like, no. All I know is we need parking. And that's just where I stood. Perfect parking. Perfect parking. Because the neighbors were through with us. Woo! The amount of complaints that we used to get, and we used to have monitors all up and down the streets and all that. It was, yeah. Are you with me? But it's provided for. Okay? It never even occurred to me about around the sanctuary. And these may not seem that significant, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's your mortgage, whether it's some health procedure that you need, you're facing incarceration. It doesn't, the universe doesn't see big or small. That's us. The universe doesn't see big or small. The universe doesn't say, well, you know, if you needed that house back in 1932, when I could have given it to you for $2,000, I could have helped you out then, but woo, you in Santa Cruz now. I can't do nothing for you now. Your need. You need $5,000 to save your house. You need $50,000 to save your house. Universe doesn't know big or small. The same gravity for a tennis ball is the same gravity for a rocket ship. Big and small is in our minds. Are you with me? That somehow the law can work up to this point, but oh. So can you imagine for a moment if those needs delighted? Just like, wow, I can't even imagine how this is going to work out. See? And I'm getting my mojo back in my life now, and I'm back to living there. And I am so proud of this spiritual community for being in this space now about our new home. Nobody freaking out. Nobody tripping. But everybody going, this is going to be good. Do you get what I'm saying? It's like we don't have to see it to be in gratitude and excited. We're excited about the very process. Just the openness about it, like, woo, it's going to be good. Can you do that with your life when you don't know where you're going to live? Ooh. Can you go, boy, this is going to be good? Okay? When you can't figure it out, can you go, wow, I wonder what the universe has got going on now? Okay? Then you'll experience grace. Are you with me? Okay? Because if you're not delighting in it, even though the need got met, you won't experience it as grace. You'll feel like you just dodged a bullet. You'll feel like some rabbit came out of the hat. And then once again, that'll happen, and then you just... etch-a-sketch it away. And you won't remember. And I'm going to end on this. So I just got through teaching this Bible series that I was doing for the ministerial students at Holmes Institute up in Santa Rosa. And there was this, we were doing these different miracles and parables, and we were doing this story about walking on the water. I know everybody's heard that concept if you don't even know like what story it's about or whatnot, but this idea of being, can somebody walk on water? Well, in this story that Jesus is walking out on the water, and his disciples, which represent all of the faculties of our mind, love and faith and all the rest of that, are in the boat. And Simon Peter, who represents faith, is like, I want to come out there with you. Jesus is like, come on. So they're out there. They're walking on the water. And then in the story, it says, Simon saw a storm in the distance. He wasn't even there. He saw a storm in the distance and started to have doubt and panic and started to sink. It says, and Jesus catches him and says, why do you have such little faith? And then the story ends how all of them are marveling. And in one of the versions, the version that shows up in the book of John, says they were all marveling because they had failed to consider the feeding of the 5,000. Their hearts had been hardened. That this incident was immediately after the story of the feeding of the 5,000. They had just been in a miracle. Etch a sketch. See something in the distance and freak out. To consider. To put it, it's defined as to put it all together in such a way that it tells you a story. Okay? So can we stop being human etch-a-sketches? And remember, can we do that? Can we do that? Yes. Let's take a breath.